G'day, I'm Mark Hoth and welcome to Swift Almanac. Now recently I've been applying for some jobs and one of those jobs has given me a proficiency exercise to do with predominantly table views and downloading some JSON from a URL. So I thought what I'd do is I would run through what it is they're looking for with yourselves, and that way you can learn along the way. Now I have already done this exercise, so don't think that I can do the whole thing in, I'm not sure how long it's going to take, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, but it's taken about 4.5 hours for me to do the research, because they wanted to use functions and facilities which I don't normally use, like URL session. I normally use Alamo Fire, and they also want to use storyboards, and even though there's not much storyboard stuff in it, I normally write stuff in code. So anyway, let's have a look at what the exercise entails, and I'll show how I went about solving that problem. Okay, so I got sent this file here. Let's show it up on the big screen. There is a JSON feed which is located at this Dropbox URL, and it says create a universal iOS app that you can use a third-party JSON parser if you desire. So you could do something like JSONSwifty if you wanted to. The feed contains a title and a list of rows. Display the content, including images, titles, and descriptions, into a table. So we're talking about a table view controller. The title in the navbar should be updated from the JSON. So we need to set the navbar title, which means we're going to need a navbar. So we're going to need to embed our table view controller in a navigation controller. Each row should be the right height to display its own content and no taller. No content should be clipped. This means some rows will be larger than others. So we need to have variable sized cells in our table view. Load the images lazily. Don't download them all at once, but only as needed. So we're going to be doing asynchronous downloads of images. We want a refresh function, which is the little pull down, it says it here, refresh button, or use the pull down to refresh. And we should not block the user interface when loading the data from the JSON feed, i.e. do it asynchronously. So in addition, what they want is they do use storyboards, so don't do it in code. They want us to use Git to manage our source code and show a clear Git history showing your process as we go along. Scrolling the table view should be smooth, even as images are downloading and getting added to the cells. Support both the iPhone and the iPad in both orientations. If threading is used, do not spawn threads manually by using perform selector on background thread. Use GCD queues instead. Comment your code when necessary. Try to polish your code and the app's functionality as much as possible. So I haven't done that yet. Anyway, commit your changes to Git in small chunks with meaningful comments, and do not use singletons. Now this is something that caused me a bit of grief, because I would have used a singleton to resolve this, because it's just easy and fast. And but anyway, they don't want us to use singletons, so that's fine. And in addition, support all iOS versions from the latest back to iOS 8, which is as far back as you can go. That causes a minor issue for the refresh functionality, because it changed in iOS 10, and use the NS URL connection framework for your service calls. And of course, it's showing the age of this proficiency exercise because it's got the NS in front of it. So anyway, we're using URL sessions to do this. So how did I go about it? Well, the first thing I did is I had a look at the data. So we copied the URL and just bring up a window there. So here you can see we've got our title, which says it's about Canada, and we've got rows, which is an array, and then in each of the records in the, or each of these rows, there's a title, a description, and an image ref. And you can see here that some of them have null for their description, so it doesn't exist. And here's one that does not have a picture, but they all have, oh no, this one doesn't have a title or a description or an image ref. Basically that's the data we need to pass. I think there are 14 records, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I'm not sure if I even counted right, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 is the language. Yes, there's 14 records. So that basically gives us an idea about what our model is going to look like. So, which is going to be pretty straightforward, because we're just going to have a model with those 3 fields, plus we're going to incorporate the image. So we'll have 4 properties in a very basic structure. So now we would want to open up our Xcode and create a new project. I'll put that on the screen so you can see what's going on. So it's going to be a single view app, and the project name is going to be test. The team is going to be me. That all looks good. We're not using core data or UI tests. And we'll put it on our desktop. We want to create the Git repository. And we're pretty good there. We do need to set the deployment target to 8, because we're not going to be able to support everything as they requested. And then we've got all these things over here. Now I'm not going to use Swifty JSON, so I don't need to use any pods at all, so I don't need to worry about CocoaPods. I'm going to get rid of this launch screen thing and change this to say go to the main storyboard. And then in the main storyboard, I don't want a view controller, I want a table view controller, and we're going to need a nav bar, so we need to embed that in a navigation controller. And we also need to set this as the initial view controller. So I can get rid of this view controller Swift, and because we've got a table view controller, we're going to need 2 files, touch classes. We're going to need my table view cell, which is going to be subclassing UITableViewCell, and we're going to need my table view controller, where it is, there it is, where we're going to do all of our work. Okay, now I like to split things up because no one likes big fat view controllers, so let's create an extension which we'll call my table view controller plus table view, and we will need UI kit in that, and then we're just going to create a simple extension of my table view controller. We don't need to add anything here because it's already subclassed in here, but we want to take all of the table view related stuff and just move it into this extension. Now for the time being, what do I need? We're going to need cell for row at. And I don't think we need anything else that's here. Editing, no, navigation, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we can get rid of all of that. We're going to configure our cell. We're going to call our cell the cell. And in our storyboard, we need to find our cell and actually I might just call it without a space in it, the cell. And then we're going to need a model file, which is not really going to have much in it, but we're going to have a model file anyway. So standard Swift file, which we'll call, I don't know, my data. And that's just going to have foundation. And we're going to import UIKit as well, because in our structure, so we're going to have a structure which we're just going to call a record. And we're going to have a variable for the title, which is a string. We're going to have a variable for the description, which is a string. We're going to have a variable which is this image href, which is also a string, and we're going to have an image which is going to be a UI image, which is going to be optional. So that gives us our record. And then in our TableViewController, get rid of this other junk. What are we going to do? Well, let's run this first and see what doesn't work before we get carried away. No, I don't want to run it on my iPhone. Let's run it on a simulator. As it's launching away. There you go. So it started up. We've got a blank table view, which is what we expect, and we've got a navigation bar here at the top. It's got an empty title currently. All moves around, and it's looking good. So now might be a good opportunity for us to go into Git and commit something. So we can get everything here. We don't have a remote at the moment. I'll push it up to my my GitHub account a bit later. So we'll just say initial build and structure for the test project, implemented data model as a basic struct. So we'll commit that, and let's see what we should be doing next. Well, the first thing we're going to want to do is get a couple of properties. So we're going to need, if we're going to place the title in, we're going to need to know what it is, and we're going to get a bunch of records for our table view. So we're going to have an array of our type record, and that array is going to commence empty. So we've got a nil array, and for the time being, that's all we'll worry about. And then, well, we want to get this JSON, and we basically want to stuff it into these properties. We can get rid of this memory warning thing. 14 records is not going to cause us memory problems. So let us create a function that we call load JSON, and now we have to use URL sessions. So and we have to do it asynchronously. It's not really a drama. So we need to create a task, a task, which will be a URL session task, or session data task, in fact. And we have the URL. Where is that? Wait a second. I've got rid of it. Okay, I'll close that window. Let me find the URL. Give me a second. Okay, so just up here, we'll go file private, let k data URL equal our URL. And then down here we need to turn that string into a URL. So, well, we should say guard let URL equals URL string colon k data URL, and else print bad URL return. Anyway, that gives us the URL that we need. And hang on, I'm just going to put some returns in because we're at the bottom of the screen. Okay. So then we need to get a session happening. So we go let session equals URL session configuration default. And then we go task equals session dot data task with URL URL. Is that correct? It is. And then we're going to have a closure because this is all happening asynchronously, and our enclosure is going to have return data, response, and error. So we need to check if we have an error. We need to check if we have some data. So I've done this two different ways. So let's do it probably the proper way. So let's go guard let data equal data. So that'll tell us we've got some data and it won't be optional anymore. And if the error is equal to nil, because we've got an error, we're going to bail. Else return, and we'll have no information. So if we've got our data, then the problem we have is, and I took ages to figure this out. It was probably 3 hours of the 4 hours I spent on the project. I was trying to figure out why I couldn't read the data. It probably wasn't 3 hours, that's probably an exaggeration. However, I went into Postman. If you haven't used Postman, it allows you to do nifty things with databases and URLs and things like that. It gives you some testing from a third party. So there's the Dropbox, and it brings up the JSON. So I actually did this initially just to make sure that the JSON was formatted correctly, and the JSON is formatted correctly, as you can see. But then I went over here to headers, and I eventually found out that the character set is not the right type for what we're looking for. We need to get it into ASCII so we can play around with it. And because I use Alamo Fire already does that for me, so I didn't need to sort of know about it. But now I do. So a bit of research later, and we want to go if value equals string data encoding dot ASCII, and then what we want to do is we want to get this data as UDF, so we go if let JSON data equals value dot data using dot UDF8. So if we have all that, then we can actually deserialize or serialize this data so that we can read it. So if let, better put a let in there. Why doesn't it like that? Everything's fine. Yes, yes. Oh, I can call this let because we don't need to worry about it. Okay, so once we're in here, what we want to do is deserialize our data and catch any errors. Print unable to parse JSON. So to deserialize, what we're doing is we're going to go let our JSON equal try JSON serialization dot JSON object with, now our data is now called JSON data, and the options, I don't think we need any. And then we're going to force coerce it to be an array of string any, and now that we've got that, we want to print the JSON and run it, and let's see if we can actually read the file and get this information. So there we are, running away. Am I running the right thing? Maybe something has gone wrong. Oh, I know what I haven't done. So over in our storyboard, we need to attach a class to the table view. So my table view controller, and this cell is going to be my table view cell. Okay. Now we'll run it, and hopefully, hopefully it'll work. I do not know. Let's see if it's bringing up this. It is. Let's see where we're failing. Got our session. A task is not coming back to us. Why is this so? Okay. Yes, our task is not coming back to us because we're not actually launching our task. So at the very bottom down here, we need to write task.resume. And if we run that now, it will actually execute what we want to see. And I'm sure, oh, I've got another breakpoint for some reason. Okay, there you go. So we've printed out our data, so we know we're reading it. We've got some nice JSON there. There's our title about Canada at the bottom. So now what we need to do is pass this data and store it in our records here. So instead of printing JSON, we'll create a little bit of space. And so we're going to go self dot, do we call it nav title? Is that what we called it? Nav title is going to be equal to JSON title is the key as a string, and if it's just not there, we're just going to have an empty string. So we end up with an empty title and nothing's going to crash. And then we've got this array of records. You can see there's a curved bracket down here, and it says here NS array. So we need to get this array. So we go let records array equal to JSON, and our array is called rows. You can see that just here. Not the flower, but pushing a boat through water, a column and a row, and that is going to be an array, because we know it's an array. Now what's it an array of? Well, we're going to make it an array of dictionaries with string and any. And well, if it doesn't exist, then it's going to be an empty array. It's going to have 0 records. So now this is going to be called through a refresh function, which means the data could already be there. So the first thing we want to do is we want to remove all of the records that are already in an array. So we're starting with a fresh slate. So we've got var self.records dot, is it remove? I think it's remove. Why doesn't it like me? Title nav looks like it's spelt correctly. I don't know why it doesn't like that. Let's just compile it and see what it's. Have I got a capital letter or something in there, or? It's very strange. Anyway, okay, well, we will fix it in a minute, I'm sure. Self records remove all. And then for each record in our records array, we need to extract some data. So we're going to go let title equals our JSON, and the field is called title. Now this is, as you can see, it's got title here. It's part of the array. It's also got title down here outside further. So it's a little bit can be confusing. It's why I don't like JSON. But anyway, which is also a string, which we will make empty. Then we have the description, which is JSON description as a string. And then finally we have this image href which is also a string. Maybe it doesn't do, so we're giving him blank values. Now, so what we want to do here is for our records, we want to now add this, and we're just going to append, and we're going to append a record and use the structure from our My Data record. It'll have a little helper that we can use, helping initializer, which we can use. Record, there it is, and we just type in title, description, image href, and we don't have the image currently, so we're passing nil, and that's why we made it optional over here, so we could create it without having the image. Now, the other thing we might want to do, oh, hang on. So it's going to go through all those records, and then, well, it's always nice to sort the records, isn't it? So we'll go self.records.sort, and oops, what am I doing? Title is, I can never get them right, but it's less than title, so I've sorted them, and that's basically going to put all of our records into our properties for our table view controller. But now we've got the data. When this comes back, we're also going to need to basically redraw it and update it. So we'll create another method called update data, which we're going to call from here, update data. So up here, we're going to have a function called update data, and we've got this nav title. So, firstly, we ain't on the main queue. So we have been doing this as a closure, and it's off doing something asynchronously. Could be on any queue, definitely not on the main queue, because the main queue is for the interface. So we want to go dispatch queue dot main. Oh, where's my dot main dot async. And what is our code going to be? So our code is going to be, we want to set the navigation, and again we're in a closure, so we need to use self navigation item dot title equals self dot nav title. I still need to figure out why it doesn't like these variables up. Oh, look, because I've put them in the wrong spot, of course. Okay. Rightio. Now we've got properties that are actual properties and not properties of a method. All these errors go away. Oh, how nice. Okay, so we've set the nav title, which is great, and oh, we need to reload the table view. So we just go self dot table view dot reload data. Okay, so we've got our okay, what's wrong here? Expecting a comma or something. Oh, we've got an append isn't sorted. Record was never used. Oh, well, that's okay. Oh, that's why. Okay, so it's not JSON we're going through here, it's record. See how confusing things can get. Okay, so if we run that, we shouldn't have any problems. I mean, what we might do here is I might do a print self dot records, and let's see if we still get all the data we need. There you go. And look, it's called our update data function, and it has updated our navigation. Hasn't fallen over because we're on the main queue, so that's pretty good. Probably time now for a commit to GitHub. We will check everything. And so what are we going to say here? Well, we're going to say load data is pulling down JSON from web server and updates nav controller title bar on success. Okay, so we've got a couple of notes in there. So we're looking pretty good. We've got our data. Now we need to display it into our table view. So we'll flick over to the table view. Now, you may or may not be aware, table views already come with an image view, and they already come with a label. And we basically need two labels and an image. So rather than stuff around in the storyboard, what I decided to do was to use the header capability. And so rather than where it's got normally you say number of sections, you would say you'd have one section, and then number of rows, you would say, you know, records.count or something like that, right? So what I'm doing is I'm saying, no, every record is its own section. So records.count is the number of sections, and every record will have one row. Okay, so this means I'm going to put the title into the header for each cell, and I'm going to put the description into the cell, and I'm going to put the image into the cell as well. So so let's do that. So there is a nifty little function called title for header in section, which looks pretty good like that, and it returns a string. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of these comments. We want to return our records, which is an array of the section, and we want to give it the title. Okay, so every time we create a section, it's going to call this title for header. What's the title for this, for the header of this section, and we're going to give it the title from our records. Okay, then down here in our cell for row at, we're going to put the description. So we're going to say cell dot text label dot text is equal to records, which is an array. This time we're going to go use index path dot section, and we're going to pass the description. Okay, so I don't know why that is not formatted correctly. Maybe I did something silly. Maybe it's just because of my extension and cut and paste. Or not, who knows. Okay, so let's run that. Oh, there you go. Oh yes, we need to put all these little optionality things in, which the compiler loves to tell us about. We haven't done the refresh yet. Is it running? Oh, there you go. Okay, so what have we got here? We've got our headers, and you notice that they're in alphabetical order. How nice that is. We have some text, but it's running off the page, and the flag doesn't have anything. And of course, we still don't have no images. So we need to make this a variable height cell. So there is another nifty little function called height for row at, and essentially what we do here is we create a dummy label. This is how I do it. I'm not sure if it's the only way, but I create a dummy label. Say 8. I don't think it really matters what these things are, but still. And I give this dummy label whatever font I want to use and all that kind of stuff. So label font equals dot system font of size. I need to use the keyword override. Give a size. Now we want to make this a multi-line cell, and so we give our tag label line break mode equal to dot by word wrapping. Our tag label number of lines I set to 0, and we need to fill the label with the text that we're going to put into the other label. So text is equal to, now we get our index path, so we just go, we just copy and paste this rather than watch me type it slowly. Okay, so we've got a description text in there, and then we call size to fit. So we go tag label dot size to fit. That'll resize this label, and now we know what the height is that we need in order to fit this text in. So so we just create a variable called image height, and it's going to be a CG float because we're returning a CG float over here, and we'll set it to be 0.0. And for the time being, what am I going to say? For the time being, we'll just make it return tag label dot bounds dot height, and we're just going to add a little bit of buffering of 6 pixels. Otherwise it'll sit right on the cell and right on top of the cell, and it'll look ugly. But now what should happen is, no, it has not. Why has it not? Because I haven't done the line breaking and stuff here either. Cell dot text label dot line break mode equals dot by word wrapping cell dot text label dot number of lines equals 0 cell dot size to fit. Okay, let's run it now. Okay, well, pretty cool. So now is called A. I don't know if we're missing text there or not, or doubt. We'll have to check out our data to find out. Let's find out a group of beavers is called, it says a colony. So there's not enough space there. Let's worry about that later. Okay, so we've got our text and we've got resizing cells. We've got images to worry about. What are we going to do about this image? So the images we need to have called here. Now we only want to load them. Our instructions will only load them when they're called. So we want to load them from our cell for row at function. Yes, but they may already exist. So we don't want to reload them if we already have them. So we want to go if records index path dot section dot image equals nil, i.e. we don't have it, and records index path dot section dot image href is empty. So we've got the not here in front, so if it's not empty, so i.e. do we have a URL, because some of those were empty back in our database, and so we can't get them anyway. We want to call a function called loadImage, which we're just about to write now, and we're going to pass that the image URL, which is going to be this thing, and we're also going to pass through the index, which is index path dot section. Now I could have just passed through the index path dot section and accessed this, you know, because everything's contained within the UITableViewController, but you know, I was actually thinking about having all this stuff as part of the data model, but then it became really, really difficult to get the data back into the view controller, especially when it's done asynchronously. So, so basically, this is what I left with. Otherwise, we've already got the record. So if we've either already got the record or it's going to always be nil. So in that case, cell.imageView.image is simply equal to records index path dot section dot image. Now that could still be nil, in which case nothing can be displayed. So let's have a quick look at that and see what that looks like. Oh, let's fix up some of these. We're missing an insert, and we need to, of course, write load image, which we're going to do over here. Okay, and we had a couple of parameters. We had image URL, which is a string obviously, and we had our index, which is an int. We use capital letters. Let's see, incorrect argument. It's me getting accustomed not to putting capital letters throughout things. Okay, so it's still running. In fact, what we're going to do is I'm going to do a quick commit to GitHub and just type in variable height for cell is calculated, and we will commit that. So now we need to write this load image, and it's just calling, doing a very similar thing to what our load JSON was doing, we can pretty much copy the top of all this. Only our URL is not this string, but it's what we were passed. Image URL, and put that there. Put our task.resume in. So we've checked whether or not everything's really cool on return, and then we just go self.records index. Index. We don't need to put .section because it's already the index. .image is simply equal to the UI image of the data that we have been returned, which is pretty cool. So, and then we've got this function that we had from before, which was the update data, which is what's putting us back to the main queue and calling table view reload. So that should allow us to view everything. So let's have a quick look and see where we're at. Oh, there you go. We've got one image. Where are the rest of them? Oh, there's a couple more. We are getting errors. Oh, cannot, because it does not conform to ATS policy. Dearie me. Okay, so we need to go over here to our information P list, where we basically need to go to the app transport security settings. There it is. And we want to go allow arbitrary loads and set that to yes. Now that'll never get through the App Store, but it will be sufficient for what we are doing. And as it downloads these images, it's displaying them. Now you can see that there's a couple of problems. First one is that the image size is always the size of the text, because we're forcing the cell to be this text size, unless of course the image is less than the size of all the available text. So, and also you've got this nasty sort of resizing sort of, or scrolling thing happening. So, and duplications of images and that's being caused by the requeuing of the cells. So how can we fix all this and make it a little bit nicer? So the first thing we can do is, when we're going for our cell for row at, in fact what we're going to do first is we're going to put our refresh thing on. Oh, stop that. We'll put our refresh control into place because that's a little bit tricky, but it allows us to do some other stuff. So we need a variable which we're going to call refresh, and we're going to call that a UI refresh control. And then down here we're going to go if hash available iOS 10.0 or better, then table view dot refresh control can be equal to refresh. Otherwise, we're in iOS 8 or 9, so we're just going to go table view dot add subview refresh. And then what we want to do is we've got to set a target for our refresh control. Refresh dot add target self selector, and we're going to call it refresh data, and that is for value changed. So we need to create this method and it needs to be object C visible. And it's going to actually be passed a parameter, which is going to be the refresh control. No, not the reference library. That's better. And what we want to do if we get this refresh is we want to call our load JSON, and when you hit the refresh control, it's got one of those activity spinners going on. So once you're finished, we want to call to the sender dot end refreshing to stop the activity spinner. Now that'll allow us to, rather than have to rebuild the application all the time, we that's probably better. Yes, rather than having to rebuild the application all the time, we can just refresh to see what's going on. Okay, so again, we've added a function. Let's see if it works. There's our spinner, it's finished, it's updating. Nothing changes because it's not on the database, but that's all good. Let's go back to GitHub and go added UI refresh control, used hash available, or not dollar available, hash available to support iOS 8/9, and we can commit that. So what were the other problems that we had? Okay, we had this problem with the the resizing the image height. So before I added this variable image height, and so what we really need to do is we need to figure out if there's nothing there. If there's nothing there, then it's going to be 0. Cell height's going to be 0. That's fine. But we want to figure out which is bigger, the image or the available text size. So the way we can do that is if records index path dot section dot image is equal to, oh, it doesn't equal nil. Okay, so if it equals nil, then we're just concerned about the text, so that's fine. If there is an image, we need to find out how big it is, and so we go image height equals, let me just copy and paste this, is the image dot size dot height. Oh, and we want to know if that is greater than let's say CG float 60, and if it is, well, what am I doing? If it's greater than 60, and if it is, we're going to make it 60, otherwise we're going to make it the record.cg height. So basically, if the image is like absolutely massive, we don't want to have taken up the whole cell. So we're just going to limit the cell size to being 60, and otherwise we're going to give it the height of the record, and we've got to put in a couple of inserting optional thingies around the place. Our compiler gives us lots of tips on how to fix these problems. Okay, and then when we're returning, we want to say we want to return the image height greater than the CG float, because everything's got to be the same. Damn you, Swift type stuff. Image height or tag label. So if the image height is larger, then we're going to use the image height. Otherwise, we're going to use the tag height with our little 6 boundary. So that should make the images a lot better. Let's have a look. So that's pretty good. There, see the cats here are bigger. We're getting this shuttering and stuff, and that's being caused because everything's being updated while I am scrolling. Now we can fix this because there is a scroll view. So if we go back to our main tab view controller, or table view controller I should say, there is a scroll, we'll begin dragging, give us that. Give me that, yes, we'll override, and all we want to do here is we just want to have a boolean that tells us that we are in fact scrolling. So if is scrolling equals true, and not there, somewhere here. Here we need a variable is scrolling, which will be false, and we also have another boolean called pending update, and that'll be false as well. So did I put that in the wrong space? Looks like I did. Let's move it to the other. They're an extension. They're in the same area, but okay. So we're setting is scrolling is true, and what we want to know is that because it could be updating like 5 or 6 of these images, and the first time it bumps them all up each time and everything. So we really don't want to redraw the screen while we're scrolling. So what we want to know is when we finish scrolling, and there's another scroll view, I think it's end decelerating. Yes. So in that we want to set is scrolling to false, and then if we have a pending update, we want to call update data, which we have, and we want to set pending update to false. Okay, so where do we do this pending update? Well, we do that as part of our sucking down our images. So instead of calling self.update data, what we want to do is we want to say if not self.is scrolling. So if we're not scrolling, then yeah, let's call self.update data. Else, I hate it when that happens. Else, we just want to set self.pending update to true. So what this is saying is we're getting the records and we're getting the data back. We've got them where they're in memory, but we're not updating the screen yet, and we're just setting a flag so that, that when we do finish scrolling, we're going to call update data. That's going to call send us back to the main queue. So we're doing UI all Swift, and then we'll call tableview.reload data, and it'll redraw everything. We'll get rid of all of the issues. So let's have a look at that. Build failed. Why am I failing? Override, of course. We need another override. Okay, so let's have a look, see how it scrolls now, and it's not doing anything. It's a bit shuttery. Now the reason that's, oh, and you can see these, it's putting these images are still there, and they're still there because of the requeuing, right? And we can get rid of that. So I'll show you how to do that as well. You go in back to the table view, and when we get to cell for row at, because we're using a reusable cell, we want to set this image view.image to be equal to nil. So what it's doing is it's going to say at the start of this cell, get rid of whatever we've got, and then when we're down here, we're just going to replace it straight away. Now, you know, that's like lightning fast. So if we already have the image and we're just moving it up or whatever, then that's all cool. But if we're replacing the image because it's been dequeued, well, we're going to be setting it to nil and it'll disappear. So let's have a look at that. That should fix that little problem. So that's looking much better. Yes. Okay, so now it's, oh, I don't know why that's happened. Okay, there you go. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. The only thing that I have to yet fix is the length of this is not calculating correctly. Might be something to do with the fact that this image is now resizing the cell. And it might be that if I just move this to the other side of the image, that it will calculate correctly, but if not, I will need to go back and do some more work. Looks like I still need to do some more work. Anyway, look, that's, and we'll just write one more commit. Added delayed update during scrolling, and added image removal for dequeuing, requiring, I don't know how to spell dequeuing, D-Q-U-E-Q-U-I-N-G, that'll do. Okay, so I think we are pretty much there, and I've got to fix out one little bug. See you shortly. Okay, so I sorted it out. The label was too wide when it was doing the calculation for the height. Wasn't taking into account the size of the image, but it's all working now. And if we look at what was required, there you go, all the text is there, it's all looking good, doesn't have a bad update. So now if the image is small and the text is larger, it all works fine. So that's all good. Updates after a scroll. So now I've got to go back and do some commenting, and I'll just quickly have a look and see. make sure we've answered all the questions. Oh, bless me. Why won't this show? There it is. So let's go through it quickly. We've got our feed. We didn't use a third-party JSON thing. We've got title and a list of rows. We've got all the content. We've put that in the nav bar. We're loading the images lazily, even though we don't use the lazy keyword. We don't download them all at once, and we have a refresh function. We're using Git. We are using storyboards, and we're scrolling smoothly even as the images are downloading and getting added to the cells. Support for the iPhone. Well, I've only looked at it on one, but we can always rotate it. It's looking good. Yes. Yes. Okay. And we can run it on an iPad, I suppose, and see what it looks like. Polish the code. Didn't have to worry about that. Comment code when necessary, so I'll put some comments in before I finally upload it. And we've written it in small chunks. We haven't used singletons. So there you go. And we support iOS going back to iOS, so that's all good. There you go. Okay, so I've added some comments and I've uploaded that to GitHub, and that's the end of another tutorial. Or at least a real-life explanation of what you can expect looking for a job. Anyway, the next tutorial we're going to do in the next couple of days is going to be going back to our members app. We're going to be doing some messaging. We're going to be using public key encryption to make our messages secure, and we'll be saving our private keys to the keychain and our public keys to Firebase. So look forward to that one the next day or so. And apart from that, join us on the Slack channel, swift-almanac.slack.com. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the good and extra good or double plus good if you're a fan of 1984 tutorials. So that's it from me. Have a good time.